early summer, the point where we're approaching the draft, NHL free agency in what would be a normal year. This is not a normal year. We're returning to play in phase 2 of the NHL's plan, so players are back on the ice, and that means goaltenders are back on the ice around the National Hockey League. Bring you into In Goal Radio, the podcast. I'm Darren Millard, along with the co-founders of In Goal Magazine, David Hutchison and Kevin Woodley. A lot to get to today as we have sightings around National Hockey League arenas. We also have our choice, or a choice statistically, for top goaltender of the National Hockey League's season that ended in early March, and the CCM Access Award winner, the person that gets their custom-made set of CCM goal gear. There's a lot to get to today. Hutch, when you look at me like that, it always concerns me, but it's been a very eventful last few days.
I actually try not to look at you through all this because I'm trying to keep track of all the things in your intro for this very unrehearsed show and which one are you about to lob my way to try and pick up. And then you talk about me looking at you and I've forgotten everything you said and what you just asked me. So
well,
I'm
the culmination of the Access design and the customizer was a fantastic success.
It was awesome. 1,400 some odd entries that got whittled down by our judges to a final winner that I actually thought was fantastic. It was one of the ones that I had picked out in my own perusal through the list as one of my faves. An old sort of Quebec Nordiques look, not to somebody from the province, interestingly. But yeah, I thought it was a fantastic set, and I thought it was awesome that we were able to get 3 celebrities to make that choice. And Woody, you actually got the pleasure of contacting them to let them know that they won. So how did that go?
Darryl Webster, he was, in his own words, he was emotional. He couldn't believe it. And a great backstory, too. And interesting we saw some of the people chirp us a little bit saying, like, oh, no surprise, he's from Quebec because it was Nordique's colors. And that the three, I don't know if they were implying that our relationship was CCM based in Montreal or implying that Luongo, Giguère, and Labonte all from Quebec. The reality is he's from Ontario. So there you go. That didn't apply. He had a Premier set, a Premier 4 set that was worn by Marc-Andre Fleury for an All-Star game. He bought it somehow used. That was his old set. Got stolen. The pads were stolen. He was without. His dad and roommate and friends teamed up to get him a new set, or new to him set of E-Flex 2 older ones, and they put some pad skin colors on it to match. So he'd been wearing sort of mismatched gear just to be able to keep playing, and now he's going to have basically his fantasy set that he designed on the Access Customizer. So he's super stoked. He coaches goalies in the GTAHL. He's a passionate gear geek. He's the exact kind of guy you'd want to win this. Not that that's why we picked him. We picked it based on the design solely, but it was nice when the winner was somebody who, kind of fit the mold and was genuinely excited about it. And I will say we had some exceptional designs and some exceptional efforts from some of the other entries, and we couldn't ignore them. So a handful of them, we sent them. It wasn't part of the contest originally, but we made sure we sent them a thank you note and to reward their efforts, a year subscription to In Goal Premium. For like Sandra, who did the video where she actually laid her pads and gloves over top of video of her sliding. There was just some exceptional stuff, and we do have one extra bonus prize that we're not quite ready to announce yet. We'll do it a little later this week, so keep an eye on the social channel because CCM decided to step up and deliver another sort of prize to a younger goaltender entry. So we'll be announcing that later this week. So yeah, it was a pretty cool contest. Like we said, over 1,400 entries, and I'm loving the design on the set that was the winner. And thanks to Roberto Luongo, Jean-Sébastien Giguère, and Charlene Labonte for taking the time to pick it out.
I hope we're not getting any hopes up either. You've already contacted that special bonus.
Yes, so if you haven't heard from me, you didn't win. Don't get your hopes up.
Sorry.
Hey, and you want to know the funny part in the voting? We didn't reveal all the finalists, but one of the finalists basically did a gear set that looked like Roberto Luongo's old Florida Bright co-host. Yep. And when Luongo voted, that was his first choice. And he sent me a note. He's like, of course I had to pick my old set first. Now, him having it first wasn't enough to carry the day and rise it high enough in the rankings because it was a little lower on the other two entries. But to get the note from Roberto saying, yes, I had to pick my old set as the top choice was pretty fun.
You know,
I just realized today that another one of the finalists that I loved was a Vegas Golden Knights theme set of Axis gear. And we had Dylan Ferguson from the organization in our set of Axis last night, and he loved them. And I'm kind of wondering whether an order will go in, but I'm going to send him that layout from the contest and say, you might need to make this one happen for you.
It might come to life. It may not have won to have it built for our regular listener and premium member, Chris, but it could be appearing on a Vegas Golden Knight goaltender near you in the near future. And Hutch, I forgot about that.
It's just my campaign, yeah.
We forgot about this. We've had access. We're getting access on the ice here. And at a time when testing has become difficult because not everybody can get on there, we Hutch delivering big time. Dylan Ferguson wearing our test set, getting it out on the ice, sliding around on it, and giving us some feedback. So when we have our full review, it'll include a pro component.
Can you...
Yeah, Fergie at one end and might have had our other set at the other end of the ice for that same scrimmage.
Is there any little tidbits that you can tell us from what Dylan had to say about the Axis?
Well, yeah, in fact, something that we've certainly mentioned before, but I don't think is going to be familiar with everybody, is the speed skin that these are built out of was not commonly available to pros. And so Fergie had never used a set of pads with speed skin on them before, and was blown away by how well they slid. That was one of the things that stood out for him. And the rebound power, of course, he's an E-Flex guy previously, and he found that the power that the rebounds were giving off, and I forget how he phrased it. I passed it on to you, Woody. Something like he knew where the rebounds were going before they even hit his pads. Just he was so sure of that control. So really like that. And he loved the feel of the Trapper. That's also been our experience in-house as well, that it's a 590, but it's a better 590 than they had before. It's a more comfortable closure, more comfortable grip. So yeah, two things he really enjoyed about it.
What was that piece of equipment that he enjoyed, that he was comfortable with?
I think you did called too. It a Trapper, didn't I? See, I whatever. I'll go with it.
Outstanding. That's great feedback though, and I didn't realize that all pros didn't have access to the speed skin as well. So interesting that they're experiencing something new as well in the form of Dylan Ferguson. You went up with the customizer, and I played around with it. You guys played around with it. I think my mistake was on my set was I tried to balance it out like in thirds, all the colors. Our winner didn't do that, and it kind of popped a little bit more because of that approach.
That was, to me, one of the most interesting things of the contest, and actually made it a little bit hard to judge, was just the fact that there's a lot of different looks, right? Like we talked about this earlier. The set I designed for the in-goal test set, a lot of blues, different tones of blues, color, solid colors. I found myself just loving the white with the subtle accents and the way that the color zones popped. And there was just so many different looks you could create with that pad. To be honest, our listeners did a much better job than I could have of sort of unleashing those different looks, and actually had me rethinking how I would design another set if I were to do it myself. So that was kind of cool to see.
Our feature interview this week is Dustin Wolf, Calgary Flames draft choice and Canadian Hockey League goaltender of the year. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but it's a really cool conversation that Kevin Woodley had. Midday for Wolf. It was mid-morning for everybody else. He gets up that early, so we'll explain all that in just a little bit. But just a couple of other tidbits. Goaltenders we're seeing on the ice around the National Hockey League. That's kind of cool. Kind of gets your enthusiasm going a little bit, Woody, when you see the clips from all these return to play in Phase 2.
Yeah, it's nice to see we're headed towards that. Obviously, still some steps to take, but anytime we see guys out on the ice stopping pucks, I think you get a little bit excited. And I think, I expect in Phase 2, most guys, I know they're in Vegas, Darren, that Flowers back on the ice, Marc-Andre Fleury's back on the ice because he stayed in Vegas. But I think the majority, what you're going to see is the goalies staying in their hometown, staying where they are and getting ice where they are rather than returning to skate with the team, at least here in the early stages. I don't think you'll see a lot of the guys that don't live in the cities they play on the ice in those cities until they have a firm date for Phase 3 in training camp. So a lot of these, the stuff we're going to see is guys on the ice, like we did with Lundqvist before with Sweden, guys back in Finland, guys back in Sweden, guys throughout the U.S., finding places to skate. I would equate this to August. You said it's early summer, it's early June, but in terms of sort of the cycle of goaltending, the guys I've talked to they look at this as sort of August. And I think the rules are even structured that way in terms of outside coaches being allowed and no team coaches and all those kind of things, because that's kind of August. That's when you get back and you just have informal skates and you get your feet under you and you do your skating and so take some shots. And so I'm starting to wonder, at the beginning of this, I thought the guys that stayed engaged and tried to find ways to get better, tried to find ways to keep their mind sharp, were the guys that would have the quickest success coming out of it. And I was curious, nervous for some of the guys that completely disengaged. I wondered if they would be slow starters coming out. But now that we've been off for 3 months, and like I said, phase 2 feels like August. That's how these guys are describing it to me. Like August is when Carey Price hits the ice for the first time. Braden Holtby hits the ice for the first time. And that's their regular routine. So I wonder if that feeling of familiarity at a time when there is no familiarity, it's new to everyone, but that feeling of having been off so long and okay, now I start skating and I've got a month and then I hit training camp and then I'm ready to go 3 weeks later. I wonder if those guys that disengaged early in this and are just now starting to go dig the gear out of the garage, the ones that's a normal routine for, will have the easiest transition back to the start of their season. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see if that's the way it goes, because my thoughts on it have certainly shifted as this timeline has changed.
Hutch, do you think we'll see the pitching machine out in the ice shooting at guys? Because that's the big winner of the big winner of the pause was the sales of the pitching machine.
Yeah, it went really well, didn't it? It's going to be interesting. If not enough players come back, they're going to need the pitching machines out on the ice to keep the goalies busy. And if too many players come back, we're going to have to go hunting for goaltenders to keep all those players busy. Because as you've said, you can only have those small training groups on the ice right now, and goaltenders can't cross between the groups. So pitching machines, extra goalies, not sure.
I've seen a few. I saw in Pittsburgh today. I know maybe this was just one end, because I know they had a goalie on the ice. I think it was Casey DeSmith at one end, but at the other end, or in a different group session, again, the video wasn't clear. It was just sort of random video of them skating. It was the old shooter tutor. Might be getting a bit of a workout here in the early stages if a lot of these goalies stay in their hometown and don't return to the team they play for.
Six players on the ice at one time. That's the maximum. So do you go 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie, and try and work the drills from that? That is challenging everybody to come up with a real effective way to do this. And I guess the first week is just shaking off the rust and getting back on the ice. Dustin Wolf has one of those pitching machines. We'll get to him in just a little bit, but before that. Interesting revelation coming out from this pause as more and more players are sort of going public, and we're catching up to them. Carter Hutton and what he had to say. Woody, can you give us the backstory on what he experienced this year?
Well, the story was at the Buffalo News, so full credit to them. I'm not sure where the interview originated, but he mentioned having a vision problem this year. And obviously when you see that on your Twitter timeline, Carter Hutton talking about a vision problem, you're clicking that link, as I did, and read the story. And I think the one thing to be very clear here is that, I thought they did a good job in the story. Carter was not looking to create excuse. You've heard Carter on the podcast. We've talked to Carter before. Like, he's not an excuses guy. And so they tried to make it pretty clear in the article he wasn't trying to make excuses. And when I texted him after reading it, he reiterated that too. A little disappointed that it became such a big deal, I think. But we're in an era where there isn't news every day. So you fill that vacuum. Something that might normally not seem like a big story becomes a big story. At the end of the day, though, he was having issues with convergence in terms of his eyes being able to converge on the puck. If you hold your hand out in front of you and then pull it close towards your eyes, for your eyes to be able to track that as it gets close to the nose, your eyes converge in, and that's similar to what, and Darren's now doing it, and I'm going to start laughing as he goes cross-eyed here, but
got to put the show on
right.
YouTube.
We do. But obviously as the puck comes at you, your eye's ability to converge and continue to collect data off a shot release as it's traveling towards you, especially in an era at the NHL level, that not just the speed of the shots, but the traffic it's coming through, the chances of it changing direction on the way, to properly track it and see it coming all the way at you, your eyes have to be able to converge. That's what they do. That's how they see a puck coming at you. And so if he had an eye that wasn't converging properly, he wasn't seeing the puck properly. And in some of the text back and forth, he said there were times where he put the glove up and thought the puck was going in it, and it just didn't. So that would have been incredibly frustrating for him. And it lasted, by the sounds of it, well until January, actually right around the time where we talked to him for the podcast. And we talked to him for what? By the time I got through my last of 6 last questions, we were a good 30 minutes at least with Carter. Never mentioned it once. So there was an opportunity there where in pretty good confidence he could have thrown it out as a storyline or as an excuse, and that's not the guy he is. So let's make it clear it's not what he's looking to do here, but there was a problem there, and his numbers improved significantly after it was addressed, and he's done some work to... you can train your eyes. We hear a lot from Holtby and guys like that about the work they do to train their eyes consistently.
Is that what Carter did? Like, he had to go back and train?
That's what it sounds like. And I haven't, I said we did a little texting back and forth, but I didn't, clearly it's not something he wants to get into a lot. But based on the article, the Buffalo News article, credit there, that's what he did in terms of rework the eyes to sort of retrain to get them to converge again. And I'd be fascinated, to maybe have another conversation with him about how this happened, whether it was sudden or whether it was over time. Because what I'm pretty confident in is that in saying this, and I should be careful here, but I think I'm pretty confident in saying he didn't have a convergence issue before, because I don't think you could play at this level if this was there long term. And I know, he's a guy who came through the Nashville organization. One of the first thing that Mitch Korn does with his goaltenders, whether it's a prospect they draft or a goalie they sign, is he takes them to a vision specialist, an optometrist and vision specialist in Minnesota, and runs all the tests in terms of convergence and divergence and whether they have any flutter in their vision as they track, across a screen laterally, and does all that testing and gives them exercises to do. So don't want to speculate on what might have happened. Obviously, brain injuries can cause issues with vision, but again, not speculating that's the case here, but it would certainly be a conversation I'd love to follow up on and see how this came to be. But, again, a guy who we're obviously big fans of and had a tough first half to the season. And so I'm not surprised in retrospect to find there was a real underlying reason for it, as much as he doesn't want to use that as an excuse. Something had happened there, and I'm just glad he sort of figured it out and had a lot better numbers in the second half, because that's the guy we're used to seeing. And it's not like, as I always say, it's not like these guys forget how to play goal.
No, and it's comforting, I'm sure, going through this extended layoff for the Buffalo Sabres, that he has an idea of what was wrong and that it's fixable, and he was able to get back on the right track. Jimmy Howard was talking this week as well about how he doesn't want to hang them up. He's a free agent. He would like to stay in Detroit, but isn't sure exactly what is going to happen on that front and where he's going to end up with his National Hockey League career. So a couple of guys, veteran guys, dealing with challenges.
Craig Anderson, another guy who 39 years old. We had a great article from him that we pulled out of one of our earlier interviews with him on how you read a release.
Yeah, that was cool.
And did you see the back and forth?
That was
on
the
Instagram
best.
That resulted.
Yeah.
I love that.
Bobby Ryan
weighing in. I thought that was awesome. So, Craig Anderson's on the record as saying he wants to keep playing as well, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously, with the end of this season, a couple of those guys that aren't playing into the play-ins, obviously in Jimmy Howard and Craig Anderson. We're going to have an influx of more young guys. Does that affect the free agency market here in Vancouver? We got a guy who, arguably should be a Vezina finalist. We can get into that. And Jacob Markstrom, free agency. Braden Holtby, free. There's a lot of uncertainty, not just in terms of when we're going to play again, but what next season's going to look like and who's going to still be around.
Well, let's put a bit of a bow on this season, and award nominations or ballots went out, and those ballots have been or in the process of being cast right now. When it comes to the Vezina Trophy winner, we've had a long discussion on this podcast before, but Paul Campbell wrote an article on In Goal magazine, and Woody, this is a situation where he crunched some numbers and came up with a result.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that Paul did it and not me, because I think if honestly though, I think if it was me, I'd be accused of bias, right? But Paul and when we say crunch numbers, let's be honest, he's looking at ClearSight Analytics, the group that's run by Stephen Valaquette. So it's advanced stats that breaks down shot quality and weighs goaltending success based on the type of shot. Because as we know as goaltenders, as we all are listening to this podcast and talking, shots are not created equal. And measuring them based on raw save percentage and, good Lord, goals against average is insane. So
crazy.
These statistics weigh them. And when you weigh them, there are some familiar names in terms of who comes out on top. Connor Hellebuck is up there. Tuukka Rask is up there. But there's a name that I'm not sure is going to even end up being a finalist that actually, by Paul's grading, ends up coming out on top of both of those names. And that's here in Vancouver and Jacob Markstrom. And,
Ontario-based Paul Campbell, just so that Woody isn't accused of bias.
Yes. And it's interesting because Markstrom grades out number one in terms of save percentage difference. So his save percentage compared to what would be expected based on the shot quality, what's the gap? His is 1.59%. Rask is 1.53. Hellebuck is fourth in the league at 1.33. Goals saved. The amount of goals you saved your team compared to expected, again, based on shot quality. How many shots you saw, what the percentage of those shots going in based on all these factors, screens, all these things are weighted on every shot. Screens, pre-shot passing, layers of screens into the slot. Like there are 34 points of data measured per shot. Connor Hellebuck is actually first in the NHL at 20.73. And Jacob Markstrom is second at 20.16. But when Paul combined those numbers, obviously Connor played more than Jacob did and probably gets credit for being the workhorse that he is. And some people might look at those numbers and say, hey, the fact he played so long and played so often, give him the nod ahead of Markstrom. But when Paul weighed those numbers to him, Markstrom came out ahead. So, again, there is still some subjectivity there. But at the very least, the fact that Markstrom's in that conversation, and I don't know that he will be when the GMs cast their vote, kind of shows us how important it is to have a look at these weighted numbers compared to narrative-driven stories and just wins. I'm pretty sure Andrei Vasilevskiy ends up being a final. That my bet is Andrei Vasilevskiy ends up being a finalist for these awards based on the GM voting. And while he is up there in wins, he is not when it comes to these weighted measures. He's in the mid-20s in both of those categories. And that's where I think it's important to... You can still have arguments at the top. Tuukka Rask is one of the top three goalies. The only thing that hurt him is he didn't play as much, or he would have had similar numbers in terms of goals saved. In that case, a job share dropped his ability to contribute because Halak had a number of those starts. But...
And how well Halak did.
Well, and there's the other comparison, too. If you weighed it, I mean... Halak also had really good numbers alongside Tuukka Rask. If you look at the difference between Hellebuck and Brossoit, the difference between Markstrom and Demko, it is significant. So in terms of one outperforming the other and how much the system might play into those three different guys, at the end of the day, Hellebuck and Markstrom, I don't think you go wrong either way. Connor is actually the guy that I had on if I had a ballot and having access to these numbers, he was the guy that I was going to have first. But at the very least, again, if you don't have Markstrom on your ballot, you're going to throw a guy like Vasilevskiy based on wins. I mean, wins count. I get it. Louis Domingue won 11 straight starts for the Tampa Bay Lightning just a season ago. It was a franchise record at the time. He's not even in the league right now.
Let me phrase it a different way. Without the high level of play from Markstrom and Hellebuck this year, those two teams aren't in the return to play tournament. It's just a fact of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I should be careful there. That wasn't meant as a shot at Louis Domingue.
No.
I actually happen to really like him as a goalie, but it's just judging on wins is not the way you judge goaltending. And that's why we wrote this article. That's why we appreciate ClearSight Analytics giving us a look under the hood so that we can start to separate some of those narrative-driven sort of storylines and really dig into who really had the biggest impact on their team. And it's Hellebuck and Markstrom at the top of that list, followed very closely, arguably should be part of the mix, by Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, you shouldn't be penalized just because of your environment, but there are some performances that outweigh that.
You want to know another guy who's up there that I think, that's the other part of when you dig into these numbers is when we talk about narratives and storylines, one of the ones that I like seeing these numbers because it debunks some of them. And one of the ones that I really like it debunking is Jordan Binnington. Because I think when he won a cup, and I think maybe I'm wrong on this, you guys tell me, but I get the sense that there is at least this thought out there, this narrative that, St. Louis is this great defensive team. We've seen other teams mimic how they build their defense based on the Blues' success, and that he was insulated to an extent. And then we see this year, his raw numbers, the ones that you see published at NHL.com, they've actually dropped since last year. But when it comes to the adjusted numbers, which would go against that narrative of how good defensively they are, he's actually one of the, he's up there in the top. I'm just looking, he's in the top 4. He's 4th behind Hellebuck, Markstrom, and Tuukka Rask in terms of that total goals saved this year. So on the surface, we look and we hear, good defense, and look, his numbers are down from last year, and we think maybe he's slipping. He's actually performed better behind a defense that is giving up more chances, understandably, because he just came off a cup win. That there's a letdown there in terms of the focus and attention to detail defensively, but he has more than made up for it and deserves arguably to be in this conversation with those other 3 guys as well. And I think is a guy that most people look at raw numbers at a 9, like Markstrom, 918, and they just miss it outright based on that.
Judge it on the season that you're in, not this career that you've had or the program that you're in. And that will take you a long way. Binnington coming off a career year a year ago. So comparing anything to that is going to be challenging, no matter how good you are. And then there's something like Dustin Wolf, who's in a program in Everett who has poured out goaltenders, but shouldn't be penalized for being part of that environment. And he's reaped the benefits of his own play. Major Junior Goaltender of the Year, USA Hockey's top junior goaltender. They vote on the top junior goaltender worldwide. Unbelievable performance by Dustin Wolf, coming off a 7th round drafting of the Calgary Flames. And he is our feature interview this week. Just a bit of a primer, Woody, on this young man who has had to beat a few or leap a few hurdles. I wouldn't call him beat odds, but has had to jump over some hurdles.
Well, I think the biggest hurdle has been his size. He's not a really big goaltender, and in an era where teams seem to, they all want bigger goaltenders, they're all scared of smaller goaltenders. Bigger goaltenders will be given a lot of opportunity to fail. Small goaltenders rarely get the chance. From a skill set, from a technical foundation standpoint, he was one of the best goalies in the draft last year. And yet it went down to those final few picks before he got selected. And at one point, as we'll hear in this interview, it didn't look like he was going to get selected. He was preparing to not be selected at all. So, I really do think that's the biggest one for him, is just overcoming some of the stereotypes we have on size. And I think this kid's going to play at the pro level. I think he's going to be an NHL goaltender based on a lot of the things that will come through in this interview.
20 career shutouts in the Western Hockey League. That is number 5 all time. 2 of the people ahead of him also played in Everett, Leland Irving and Carter Hart. And Hart and Wolf crossed paths early in his junior hockey career, and they've both been Major Junior Hockey Goaltender of the Year in the past. And following in Carter's footsteps, pretty good skates to fit in. Here is Dustin Wolf, In Goal Radio, the podcast feature interview with Kevin Woodley.
That's a heck of a run you've been in on, Dustin. The season may be over, but the awards keep piling up. The latest one being the Canadian Hockey League Goaltender of the Award, Goaltender of the Year award. What's it been like? It's got to be tough not being on the ice, but nice to be recognized for the season you had, as much as you didn't want it to end when it did.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty big honor to be able to receive all these awards. It's kind of just a testament to the organization, and also just all the support I've been given between my parents, Everett, Calgary. The list goes on and on of the support staff I have in my life. So, like you said, definitely tough currently, but very fortunate to have some good news rolling in.
Now, there's no shortages of this particular award in the trophy case down there in Everett. Obviously helps when you're got Carter Hart leading the way in terms of racking up those awards. Like, what's the deal? Can you?
I don't know. It seems to be a pretty common question nowadays. You know what? I think it's just we have a real good support staff, whatever, the coaching staff, the general manager, and you know, everybody just kind of puts it all together and it clicks. So, you know, I've been with James Jensen, who's our goalie coach up and ever now for numerous amount of years since I was a little kid. And, you know, to have him on the ice every, you know, a couple times a week is definitely pretty handy. And, you know, I'm very fortunate of that. So, you know, can't thank the staff and obviously Jenner enough for all of that. And hopefully we can keep it going.
Well, obviously, we're big fans of Jenner too, and we met you through him and have had the pleasure of being on the ice with him at the Net 360 camps in Kelowna. You know, I think 2-3 summers in a row. There are some common ties there, coaching ties, philosophy ties between Jenner and Carter. But before we get into those, you guys had a season where you were together in Everett. As you've watched him take those steps so quickly from junior to pro and all the way to the NHL, faster than a lot of guys do. Like, what do you remember of your year together, and what are some of the things, if anything, that sort of, whether it's similarities or things that rubbed off, lessons you learned from him that have helped drive you?
Yeah, I think what I noticed right off the bat is just how much of a pro he is. You know, it's easy to say, I'm going to go to the rink and do all the right things, but he truly did do it. And obviously it shows now he's playing in the NHL for a reason. So, no, it was pretty amazing just to sit back and kind of watch what he did. It was pretty spectacular. And, you know, you can pick up things pretty easy off a guy like that. You know, just the way he treats himself, his body, putting the right fuel into him and getting the right rest. And also just doing anything he can to get better, even when he's not on the ice. So it was definitely pretty special. And, you know, I was able to take quite a lot from it.
Now, obviously, you're speaking to an audience of goalie geeks, 100% goaltenders listening in here. So can you give us any examples? Obviously, we've had Carter on as well, and we've talked to his sports psychologist. And like I said, worked with, you know, a lot of the same goalie coaches that have common ties with Jenner and Dustin Schwartz and that crew. Are there any particular things? Like, have you started doing the eye drills or any of the programs that he uses? What are some examples of, or is being pro just really all about taking care, like you said, taking care of the body, rolling out after a game and those types of things?
Yeah, I think just overall being a pro is kind of the main thing that stuck up. But I mean, like, he was always practicing his juggling, his eye skills after practices. You know, I haven't taken it that far just yet, but will eventually for sure. But you know, he was very detail oriented in his practices. If he didn't do something right, he was gonna go back and redo it to make sure he did. Obviously a super competitive person, and you know, I'm pretty competitive myself, so it was a pretty good rivalry between us in battle days. So it was pretty enjoyable, and you know, I kind of wish you could go back and just watch a couple more games sitting on the bench.
I was going to say, as much as here I am asking about Carter Hart and what did you take away from him, I'm guessing there's going to be some things he took away from you, because talking to Jenner and talking to some of the people that have been around you for a long time, you are as competitive as they come. Where does that come from? Where does that competitive spirit, and how do you channel it the right way? Because we see, you know, obviously there's probably been times in your career, as young as it is, where, you know, you can go a little too far on the competitive nature, or how have you found that balance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mom was a pretty competitive person. Obviously, I like to consider myself the competitive out of everybody, most competitive. And like you said, you can easily take it too far. Like, anything I do, I want to be the best at and do whatever I can to win. It doesn't matter if it's a board game on the ice or whatever it may be. It's win or win. Basically, you don't lose. So I've kind of come to the realization that after working with a mental performance coach out of Vancouver, just trying to calm yourself down a bit in terms of, you know, if you do lose, you can take a lot from it and learn. So the common saying is, you either win or you learn. but obviously I want to win in everything I do, and it's just kind of built into me.
I was just going to say, I guess competitiveness should never be a bad thing. I guess as long as you don't dwell on when the results don't necessarily go your way. Are there any tools beyond having talked to a sports or mental performance coach? Has he given you any tools, anything beyond just advice, any concrete things that you take away that maybe another young goaltender listening right now might be able to benefit from?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with him for 2 years now, and like you said, just hitting the reset button is a big thing in that. And obviously, after a game, you give up 3 or 4 goals, and it doesn't normally happen very often. And you might look back and say, like, what the heck just went on? Like, why did I just give up 3 goals, or whatever the case may be? You can put it in your head, but you got to be able to just move on, especially in the Western League when you're playing 3 games in 3 nights. Like, you got to be able to put it behind you and regroup and focus on the next task at hand. But one thing we do a ton is, especially during the season, and I've been starting to meditate quite a bit. So I love doing that on game days. It really just gets you more down to earth. So especially as a goaltender in tense situations, I feel like it can be very beneficial. And one thing I also do is I love my affirmations, just kind of pumping yourself up a little bit before you get onto the ice. And there's quite a few tools that you can utilize, and it goes pretty deep in depth. So
okay, so can you share an affirmation, or is that too personal?
Competitive is definitely one of them.
So as you're heading out on the ice after you've done your, whether it's eye hand drills or stretching or dynamic warm up, as you're heading out to pregame, is that when you're is it a lot of self talk like that way, Dustin, or how does that manifest itself?
So mainly I just do it on in between each period. So right before we go out, so about 4 minutes left on the clock. Kind of just spray some water on my face, gonna wake myself up a little bit, and then just kind of pump your tires a little bit, if you'd say. But whatever helps you stop the puck, I guess.
Yeah, no, hey, I mean, and that's why I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we've got a lot of young goaltenders listening right now that would love to follow in your path or chase the path you're pursuing. And the tools to manage the ups and downs that come with it are a big part of it, especially mentally. So appreciate you sharing sort of some direct tips there. Let's go back into the history. How'd you get started? Because you're growing up in, if I got it correctly, originally in San Jose, which is where we catch you now, or in that area. How'd you fall in love with hockey and then the position?
Yeah, I was born in Gilroy, so about 25 minutes south of San Jose, pretty small town, kind of known for the Garlic Festival. So grew up there. Just my parents had season tickets to the Sharks, so went to a ton of Sharks games for numerous amount of years, and kind of just grew fond of it. Of that, my parents didn't play hockey. Like, my dad played a little bit of beer league, but that was about it. So a little unorthodox way of getting to the sport in terms of parents not really playing it, but just fell in love with the game. As soon as I stepped foot on the ice, I kind of just took off, and here we are now. So it's been a journey.
Was that first step on the ice as a goaltender, or was it young enough that you were playing all kinds of different positions? And how did you end up in net?
Yeah, so kind of just started as a skater for a very short period of time, just to kind of learn how to skate. And then you get yourself enrolled into in-house, I guess. And at that time, there were no designated goalies, so I was just the crazy one to volunteer to sit in the net and have puck shot at my head. So it kind of just took off from there. Eventually you get the gear, and the next thing you know, you want, or teams want you to come skate. And so it goes by quick. It's one day you're just learning to skate, the next day you're traveling hockey. So it definitely goes by fast.
Now, who was your guy growing up? Who was the guy that, as you're getting started there, as you're envisioning making saves in big moments, the Game 7 overtime cup winning save, who was the guy you were picturing yourself as?
Yeah, so growing up in San Jose at the time, Nabaka was the man. So crazy enough, I'm going to be chatting with him later on this week, just kind of picking his brain. Kind of crazy to think you're watching him as basically your childhood idol, and next thing you know, you're going to be hanging out with him. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's definitely pretty awesome.
Okay, now there's another experience. This won't be the first time you've had an opportunity to talk to him, though. You gotta share the story with our listeners about you and the Sharks, and if I'm not mistaken, a chance to even get on the ice when you were a young guy.
Yeah, so crazy enough, we were just going to the rink for a skate. I'm not sure if it was a lesson or just to hang out, really, but the Sharks were practicing on one of their back rinks, and normally they have it closed down, but they had it open on this day, and kind of was just hanging out watching it before having to go get on the ice. And next thing you know, Warren Strelo was the goalie coach at the time, so he's out on the ice in his wheelchair, which is crazy to think of now. Like, you don't think of it as a kid. And obviously is really big in USA Hockey, and they named a bunch of caps after him. And so it was definitely awesome. You get to just get your stick by on everybody, and at that time you're going crazy. You don't know what's going on, and kind of just a dream come true at that point. But it's something you don't really think about too much, but it was definitely a fun memory.
Oh, and Warren Strelo, an absolute legend of the position in terms of teaching goaltending, and actually, if I'm honest, probably a guy that we've been pushing to. It's about time we get some goalie coaches in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and the first name that's jumped off our tongues has been Francois Allaire since he hung him up. But truthfully, Warren Strelo deserves to be in that conversation as well and near the top of it. So that's pretty cool that you got to meet him back then. And when did you start getting to the point where you had it? Like, when did you meet Jenner? When did you start? When did it go from something where you were just a kid out there playing, having fun, to like, hey, this is something I really want to make sure I do at a high level, and that drive and that competitiveness? And when did you see maybe this is something you could be doing for a long time?
Yeah, so just playing youth hockey in San Jose area. There was a dad and his son that would come out to practices and help out the goalies, which is kind of, you don't really see that too often anymore. But they knew Jenner and connected us, and I was probably 6 or 7 at the time when I started with him. He would come up from LA and skate a couple times on the weekend in San Jose, and you know what? It's been nearly 15 years with him now, and every day is an adventure with him. It's fun.
So okay, now, so what would have been the focus back then? Well, I mean, obviously you're 6'7", you probably don't even remember these skates, but we've had this conversation with Eric Comrie as well, who goes way back with Jenner, remembers those early skates, skating without creases, skating without shots, things like that. What do you see as the roots of your game, the foundation, if it was laid as far back as then, that you see as still being a strength now? Obviously it's evolved, but
yeah, I think skating was definitely the main priority to start. The common theme is, if you can't skate, you can't play hockey very well. And so that was kind of the main focus, just make your skating as good as it could get for that age, and be able to move on. But at that time, like, head trajectory wasn't really a thing as of yet, but just a few years later, it became a pretty big topic in the hockey world. And so I was kind of one of the first to kind of get engraved into that sort of structure. And obviously I'm doing fairly well with it as it is. So I'm very fortunate to have him in my back pocket.
Well, and obviously we hinted at some of those connections between you and Carter, but they do extend to coaching, because I said I've been on the ice with Jenner, and I know he has a relationship with Lyle Mast, as does Dustin Schwartz, who's obviously worked with Carter from a young age. So when you guys are out there playing, when you were in that year together, you're probably not talking in terms of head trajectory, but were there commonalities in terms of efficiency and movement? Because I think a lot of people, like, how would you even define that yourself? I think a lot of people think it's just about shot release. Shot release is one thing.
I think there's a lot of different foundations that go into it. You got your eye tracking. You got to be able to read the shot off the tape. I think just being aware of your surroundings, and also just being able to, I'd say, just be similarly structured in terms of remaining calm. You don't want to be too, how do I say it, all over the place, I guess. So the definition of it can be very extensive, but it gets the job done. I'll say that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, to me, the part that I think gets overlooked from the outside is when we get into things like, how it ties to movement and efficiency of movement and rotation and a lot of early set, early angle, a lot of things that I'm not sure a lot of people even think about when they think of tracking. They think it's just watching the puck. So, anyways, we'll move on quickly from there because we're gonna confuse people. That relationship with Jenner. Now, you move from San Jose down to LA, you play with the Junior Kings, and then you end up back up in Everett. And Jenner's not the coach at the beginning, but he was your coach for the last little while. Like, how cool is that you guys have been able to sort of stay together and then be together at the WHL level now?
Yeah, definitely pretty unheard of. When I moved to LA, a big resource was that I'd be able to skate with Jenner twice a week. And, twice a week for 4, 5, 6 years, like that goes a long way. And obviously it just happened to be that they were moving up to Seattle for his wife's job up in Starbucks. And it happened to be I ended up in Everett. And Shane Clifford was the goalie coach my first year with Carter. And then he went on to go over to Erie in the OHL, and kind of just Jenner fit right in, slipped into the spot, and it's been great to have him up in Everett for the past 2 years.
Okay, so draft. You from Everett, you end up at the draft last year. You get picked by the Flames. What's been the progress? That's such a big step. The progression from junior to pro. What kind of lessons have you taken? Obviously, you haven't made the step yet. But in terms of preparing for it, what kind of things do you hear from Jordan Sigalet? How has your focus evolved since that day?
Yeah, I think just trying to learn how to be a pro. Like I said with Carter, he treated himself right, he slept right, he eat right. So kind of just being able to adopt those values and really put them into play. I think that was a big step. Coming out of camp, there were a few different points of emphasis in terms of just playing the puck a ton. Like I already played it a lot as it was, but just do it even more, get better at it. Just continue to improve your skating and work on dealing with traffic. Guys are going to get bigger and stronger, and you got to be able to deal with it, especially as a smaller guy like myself. But there's a whole lot of things you can take out of a organization, a guy like Siggy as well as Thomas Spear, and they're kind of endless information books.
What is there anything other than the puck handling or traffic? Like if traffic, for example, without being in it and facing it, like puck handling, something where you can make a conscientious effort to get out and handle it more. Traffic, is there any way you can sort of prepare for what awaits once it's everybody is full grown adults as opposed to playing junior where everyone's under 20 or 20 and under? Is there any way you can prepare?
Yeah, it's definitely a little different. We've got a few tools at the rink. Jenner has these, we call them tripods, I guess you could say. You're probably familiar with them, but
I may have been the guy that set them up with them.
Yeah. So those are pretty handy. You can kind of find ways to see through it or around it. So those are pretty difficult to see through at times, and you just have moving screens, just take away your vision for a second, being able to basically lock back on and re-engage yourself. I think vision's obviously probably the most important part in hockey. As long as you can see it, I think you're likely going to stop it. So I think just dealing with traffic in terms of not being able to see it for a certain amount of time, being able to re-grab it with your eyes, I think is very important.
Okay, and obviously that's a great example of something you can train without having to be in that moment, be in that experience. Now, you mentioned size. Notice how I didn't ask it because we don't think of it that in the same ways here at In Goal as maybe some other people do. That draft that day, where's the, like, I've read a lot of stories about how he's got a chip on his shoulder now and all this stuff because you weren't picked until late in the 7th round. And I think we all know that is strictly based on your size, because based on performance and based on skill set, I've talked to goalie coaches in the National Hockey League that had you ranked a hell of a lot higher than there. But people have become scared of size. how do you approach that? Where's your mindset on it? You can't change it. You're 6 foot now. But we see guys like UC Saros having success. We see guys like Alexander Georgiev having success at just over 6 foot. Jonathan Bernier's had a hell of a career at 5'11". How do you approach that? How do you handle the sort of some of the stereotypes that come with it?
Yeah, I think you just gotta find some different ways to make up for your couple inches. Like you said, height isn't the end all for sure. I think being able to skate well, being able to move around the crease as quick as you can while maintaining being set and ready for a shot. Just finding different ways to be mobile and make up for the couple inches you may lack above your shoulders, but just gaining strength in your legs. I mean, your vision, you're just being able to read plays. Like, you can make up for a couple inches, and it's unfortunate the way scouts always look at it, but it just happens to be the way it is.
You've similar experience at the Bantam draft as well. Did that help you prepare for what happened at the NHL draft, or how hard was that to sit through it?
Yeah, it was definitely, I'd say, unexpected in the way it took place. Well,
because you were
successful year,
and you're probably hearing the same things I was.
Yeah, so I think the common, or the word around the street via my agent and just some like different people, was anywhere between like rounds 3 and 5, and obviously it was pretty easy to make the trip up, just a 2-hour drive from Everett, which was pretty handy. But you're getting into the 5th round, 6th round, and you're getting a little nervous. Like, why are you not getting picked? It seems like I had such a successful year. I don't know why I was getting overlooked. And then come 7th round, it just came into talks of, there's going to be 10 different teams that want to invite you to camp, and we got to figure out within the next 24 hours where you want to go. And just happens to be I went down, sat back in my seat, and next thing you know, Calgary called me, which was obviously pretty spectacular. I'm sure you've seen the video of my family just kind of erupting in the stands, and definitely a pretty awesome moment for sure.
The only downside for me is I had to see it on video. I actually covered that draft, Vancouver being my home base, but it actually took so long that I was stuck writing other stories by that point and couldn't leave the computer. So I missed the live reaction, but that video was pretty good. We talk a lot, we hear a lot about using it as motivation. It kind of seems to me that you're not a kid that needs a lot of motivation. You've been pretty self-motivated probably since you first got on the ice at 6 or started playing goal at 6 or 7 if you're working with Jenner all the way back then. But can you, does that become a narrative for us, or can you use it as fuel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every time I talk to a different reporter or whatever, it's always, they picked you late, but you know what, I'm just going to keep pushing and pushing. It doesn't matter where I was picked. I've been fortunate enough to sign my contract now, and just kind of use that as a way to keep pushing and don't let anything stop you. I think chip on the shoulder is definitely there. The easiest way I want to think about it is I want to make sure that the other 30 teams that didn't pick me are going to be losing some points down the road. So, and hopefully Calgary's gaining a couple.
That's a good way of thinking about it. What you mentioned the contract. Like I said, it has been a big summer contract. WHL Goalie of the Year, CHL Goalie of the Year, all kind of one after the other. Has anything changed now that you've signed the contract?
Not at all. I think just continuing to find ways to get better, training. Obviously, times are kind of limited right now in terms of gyms and ice, but I've discovered some different ways. I got that little baseball shooter or whatever you want to call it that you guys put out there about a month ago, so that's pretty handy. We can move on to the slide board at some point, so that's been fun. And I'm just starting to train a little bit in the Bay Area, and just get into the gym as much as I can, even though there's not full structure going on.
Well, I know we're talking to you pretty early in the morning, and you've already been at the gym and back, and you said you were up at 4:30, and it's like 10, and you're onto your second breakfast already. So I know you're putting the work in already. Clearly, that's not an issue. Let's talk about the slide board, because we've had a lot of questions about it. We obviously saw the video when when Calgary signed you, I think was the day we first saw that video of you on that octagon-shaped slide board. At a time when you can't get on the ice, how big has that been in terms of at least being able to initiate some crease movement patterns, including down patterns? And what do you love about that particular slide board? One thing I noticed, like the beveled edges. So when you catch an edge with your foot, because it sort of looks like that edge is at a 45-degree angle, to me, that looks pretty close to imitating the sort of ankle flexion you'd need to catch an edge in a skate and push the other way. That was one of the things that jumped out at me. What do you like about it?
Yeah, it's definitely incredible. It was one of those things where I texted Siggy one day and said, hey, like, what can I be doing right now? And he's like, get a slide board. So I'm like, which one? There's 1,000 different ones on eBay or Amazon. And so a couple of days later, he says, yeah, check this one out. I pull it up on my phone and I'm like, well, that's a steep price, but that does look familiar. It just happened to be that my local gym just had one just sitting around. So I was like, whoa, let me text them and get a text back. And they're like, yeah, come down, grab it, use it as much as you want, like take it home. I'm like, fantastic. So I took it home, and obviously that video was something pretty awesome. I think I had sent that to Siggy on like 2 days before I had signed, and next thing I know, it's on Twitter. So yeah, there's been quite a few ways to be able to implement some awesome things between just sliding on your knees via some knee pads and socks. Trying to regain your edges as much as you can without being on the ice. I was able to throw in that shooter, just kind of aim in a different direction, slide into shots. Use your hands as much as you can. Obviously, you don't have any pucks to catch right now. So, and then also my old skating coach, who I'm actually training with right now, she does workouts on slide boards. So I called her one day and she put me through this 45-minute workout on the slide board, and next thing you know, you're dead. You're sweating like a pig, and obviously I've been able to implement that a ton. So you're between the little bit of gym work you can get and that, I mean, you're getting some pretty good work in there. And so, I mean, you got the slide board for not only hockey related things, but you can get a full body workout on there for sure.
Yeah, we've seen that in too. And I'm not sure who your skating coach was that was doing, but I know like we've done some work with Maria Mountain, does a lot of goalie specific training, works with Carter Hutton. And I've seen, in the past, she had some workouts on slide boards as well. So a chance to maybe put some skating specific movements into your day at a time when, and into an active workout at a time when a lot of people are sort of stuck, sort of outside of skating routines in terms of looking for cardio. So it sounds like a positive. Now, the lightning bolt, I got to say, in terms of learning to be a pro, Dustin, we got a text from Jenner with you tagged in it about the ball shooting machine, the Lightning Bolt Pro. Now, this was the night before you signed your contract with the Flames, and not a peep out of you that contract announcement was coming the next day. So in terms of being a pro, not leaking things to the media, I've already told Siggy, like, you've got that dialed. Here we are having this conversation about the little ball shooting machine, and never even hinted this big announcement was coming the next day. So check mark in the be a pro category there. But I think it is a credit to you that, I'm always a big fan. We're always big fans of the no stone unturned guys, the guys that are always looking for ways to get better. And here you are reaching out to, little old In Goal magazine to, hey, does this thing actually work? So what's been your experience with it? I know it's not perfect, but we liked it as a sort of reasonable price point for people to, like you said, activate the hands.
Yeah, absolutely. For $50, it's pretty useful. You can use it in your house, in your garage. Like, it's not going to really damage anything. Those balls are soft enough. They do vary in speed. Some come out a little faster than others, but pretty unpredictable, which is pretty handy for a goaltender. But for a $50 price point, like it's more than useful for what it's done. So
now, have you started to if you had an opportunity the other part of this is if you can't get on the ice, looked at any like synthetic ice, or is that something you're looking at in the future too in terms of skating? And I guess it probably all depends about in terms of what other opportunities are going to present themselves to actually get on the ice here as things open and close, and depending on where you're at.
Yeah, I know up in Everett, like the rinks are non-existent currently, for at least for a little while longer. And so the place I'm training at now actually has a little bit of synthetic ice, but not a ton. So you can get in your gear and take some shots, which I took my first shots in 3 months yesterday. So had to kick off some rust. So it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. But I mean, just to put the gear back on, it felt nice. And, putting the gear on in 90-degree weather was interesting, but well worth it.
I was going to say there's probably a fair bit of sweat pretty quick in that temperature. What's the hardest part right now for you? I guess for a lot of goalies, especially as much as the NHL guys are trying to plan, how do I approach so I'm ready, say August or July, you don't have a date yet. How have you, where are you looking to find that balance? Is it important to take time off to sort of get away from it and relax, not knowing how long that might be before you're, in a competitive environment again? Or do you still have to maintain a focus of, hey, I could end up being invited for phase 2 or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think once the season was canceled and obviously there was a week or two of limbo of whether or not the season was going to continue or they were going to cancel. So you're still staying in shape at that point. For the first 3-4 weeks after that, I wasn't really sure what to do. You go from going to the rink for 6 hours a day and working out to doing absolutely nothing, sitting on your couch and playing video games. So it took a little while to figure some things out, but after I did, it was very beneficial. I was able to start with a nutritionist, kind of get that squared away in terms of trying to gain some weight. Haven't been the heaviest of people in hockey, so trying to address that issue. And like I said, just getting into the slide board workouts and continuing with my mental performance coach just to try to keep my head on straight during these times. So I mean, and also just contacting Siggy, finding different ways to get better. And the way I look at it now is terrible time, obviously horrible things going on right now, but couldn't have thought for a better way to spend time and utilize this time to find ways to better yourself in terms of not only on ice and off ice training, but also just in life in general. So like you said, hopefully I'd love to get up to Calgary soon, but whatever happens. I'm just going to keep working.
Oh, well said, Dustin. Listen, we'll let you go. Really appreciate your time today. And like I said, best of luck. I don't know when the future starts for you, but best of luck in it. I know you'll be ready because we've seen the work you're putting in.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Bay Area, LA, Everett, and then, of course, drafted by the Calgary Flames. Incredible journey that is about to take its next step. A year into being a professional property of the Calgary Flames, 7th rounder, and that was an emotional moment, Woody, that drafting in Vancouver.
Yeah, and he's got a few teams. He talked about having teams regret the decision to pass him over. He's already got a few that were thinking about drafting him that balked. Now he's had the season, followed up with the season. He just coming off CHL Goal of the Year, WHL Goalie of the Year, all the awards you mentioned. And he's got a few of them kicking themselves. And funny little side story, when he talked about he's going to get an opportunity, that he was on the ice and he got the signature from Nabokov and met Strelo at a young age in San Jose. Now he's back in San Jose. Cool. He's going to get an opportunity to talk to Nabby. Well, we know the goalie coach that he's worked with, James Jenner, that he talked about so much there. I was actually on the ice in Kelowna. I think, Hutch, you were there this year too, where Nabokov and Jenner were on the ice together for the first time, and a lot of the philosophies in this new philosophy, or newish philosophy of tracking that Wolf talked about, that was Nabokov learning it for the first time. It was fascinating to watch that conversation go back and forth, and how a lot of it, because it's not reinventing the wheel, it's just thinking about it in a different way. And as a point of emphasis, a lot of it Nabokov could relate back to from his younger days in Russia in terms of some of the core philosophies they were taught, that the way they tied into it. So that'll be a fascinating conversation for Dustin. I'm not even sure he was aware before we talked that as he gets set to talk to Nabby, that he actually knows his old coach, James Jensen, as well.
whole bunch of tentacles there that are binding this whole thing together, including that relationship with Carter Hart and the awards that Wolf has won and Cart has already done. Minus one award.
Yeah, -1. And I have had the privilege to be on the ice with Jenner as he's teaching, and he's a fantastic teacher. Lots of detail in everything that he does. It's never just do this. It's a long explanation exactly why he and Woody would get along in that respect.
No pucks would we stop. We just talked the whole time.
No, that's right. We run out of time. Sorry, guys. Ice time's up. No, he's a great teacher, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the ice with him and learn from him. So when I saw that Dustin had won the WHL Goalie of the Year, I just fired a text off to Jenner and said, "Congrats, great achievement. Really, really happy for your guy." And he wrote back that now we're just hoping for the CHL Goalie of the Year award. We call that one the Hart trick. Of course, after Carter Hart, who had won the WHL and then also their conference Goalie of the Year and then the CHL Goalie of the Year. And as you pointed out, Wolfie's managed something that Carter would never have been able to do, and that's the USA Goalie of the Year as well. So fantastic season for him. And as you were saying earlier, Woody, I had spoken to one NHL scout, and I don't have permission to share the story, so I'm not going to mention any names or teams right now, but who described Wolf as, quote unquote, a perfect goaltender. Perhaps if you take size out of that, but I would argue that size shouldn't matter. And actually I've been doing a little messing around with the math at home through a homeschooling math project, as we're all stuck here at home. And my daughter had to do a little investigation, and she was comparing save percentage, flawed as it is. Woody's already said we didn't have access to the adjusted numbers, but save percentage to height, and found basically zero correlation in the NHL, which is like really zero. And so it should be. The NHL doesn't pick for height; it picks for who can stop pucks. So knowing that today, I think is great for Wolf's chances to be a force in the NHL at some point in the future as he continues to develop.
5th round draft choice into the Western Hockey League, 7th round selection in the National Hockey League, and he is the CHL Goaltender of the Year. That's an incredible run and a long-standing relationship with his goalie coach, Woody. Last word to you on this, but it's almost 3/4 of his life that he's been working with Jenner.
That's a heck of a relationship that they've gotten. Pretty neat, from starting from the age of 7, and pretty neat that they get reunited in the Western Hockey League and get to go on this journey together. Because obviously, I can't remember if we talked about it in the interview, but if people are unaware, like when Wolf arrived there and Carter Hart was there for that final season they played together, the goalie coach was Shane Clifford. So it's not like he chose Everett because his goalie coach was there. His goalie coach ended up getting the job after Dustin Wolf had already been there for a year. And the fact they've been able to do this together is pretty neat to see this relationship throughout to up to the next level. So pretty cool story, and obviously a pretty neat kid who again, falls into that category of no stone unturned. And we know I'm a fan of those goalies, the ones that are always looking for ways to get better. And he certainly fits that category.
And it's the benefit and the influence of having a franchise in the Bay Area with the San Jose Sharks, because without his parents going to the San Jose Sharks games and having those season tickets, he doesn't get turned on to hockey, and maybe he's a ball player, maybe he's not even into sports. So it's a great story of the influence of the National Hockey League in San Jose and the Bay Area. For Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison, I'm Darren Millard. Thanks for listening to In Goal Radio, the podcast. From a wolf at your door to one keeping everybody out and guarding that door to making sure that nothing gets in. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again on In Goal Radio, the podcast.